Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully everyone's keeping safe wherever you guys are around the world. For those of you, you won't be able to see yourself. So this is basically a webinar session. So you'll be able to see us as panelists and our guests all the way from America. Probably a day. Thank you, first of all, Stacy and Matt for waking up so early that time to meet South African Standard Time, and wherever everyone else is tuning in, we're very grateful for having you guys here today. And yeah, today's this is our first rendition of the live locker room chats. We have probably 6, 7 lined up for the year. This is the first one, and today is all about feeling great together. And this is and the reason why we had this this webinar. Firstly, we would also like to thank the Alliance Social Workers in Sport for partnering with us, the SSCN, and as well. And they want to also get their work out from America to Africa and basically tell people a little bit more about from the psycho side of sport, looking at NGO development and all of that. And obviously today in the title itself, strengthen communication to build better relationships. So Stacy and Matt will present, and then we'll then have an open floor discussion after they're done. Feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like, because you never know when we might get them again. And obviously Stacy and Matt, they have a wonderful, wonderful experience, especially from the US of A, where a lot of things happen that side, where a lot of things get questioned, and they've dealt with a lot of firsthand and obviously experience from their side as the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. So I'll hand over to you guys. Thank you so much.
Zane, thank you so much. We also would like to thank Norman, who is also here on our panel with us this morning. And a big thank you to the Sport for Social Change Network for allowing us to collaborate with you all and to join you in this partnership. So Stacy, if you want to go ahead to the next slide.
Why isn't it going?
There we go. So Stacy and I wanted to go ahead and share our contact information straight up front. Please know that you're welcome to reach out with us to questions or about comments or for possible collaborations at any point that you feel necessary. So we get re-energized and reinvigorated every single time we're able to have conversations about the ways in which we can use sport as a good for the world. So there's our contact information. Please take advantage of it. I know that Zane is also going to be sending out the slides from today's presentation. Those slides are fair game for everybody to utilize to the best of their ability and to bring back to your organizations or to bring back to the families and the children that you might be working with there in your local communities to use for your common good. So before we go to the next slide, I do just have kind of a quick little story to share. So I had the privilege the other day of speaking with one of our members that lives in Mumbai, India. And I love these types of conversations, and I love the fact that we have the ability to use technology to the best of our advantage for that. And I leave each one of those conversations, especially from the international perspective, always engaged and always excited. So it was 9 o'clock at night when I was talking to Premad, who was talking to me at 6 a.m. in India. And it was really cool to be able to end that conversation and go and to tell my wife and to tell my kids that as I go to bed tonight, he's waking up in the morning, yet we're both thinking about the exact same thing. So while we're half a globe away from each other, we're still able to share that intimate connection and that desire to utilize sport as a platform to do great things for the societies in which we live in. So I hope that as all of you all participate throughout these locker room chats from now through the end of this series that we've been able to be a part of, that you feel that same sense of collaboration and connection, because ultimately, while we might be in different geographic regions of the world, we all do share that same mission and that same value to try to make sure that we're doing all that we can to best serve the athletes that are in our lives. So go ahead, Stacy. So as part of this collaboration, we were really excited to be able to enter into an agreement with the Sport for Social Change Network to participate on a handful of different things. Education is one aspect that I think both of our organizations believe very strongly in. That education is a driving force to change, and it allows for us to open up conversations and to share in collaborations that will help each of us to be able to grow. So while we hope you certainly gain information from this presentation, I have no doubt that Stacy and I will be able to gain information from you all throughout the question and the answer period, and as we become participants in the later locker room chats and get the opportunity to hear from individuals across the globe that are going to be presenting on different conversations. So I do want to spend just a brief little bit of time talking about the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. I know for many of you, this might be the first time that you've heard about the organization that Stacy and I represent. So I want to just give you a brief background about how we got started and why we feel it is such a good fit for this partnership with the SSCN. So the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports started back in 2015. There were 4 individuals, myself being one of them, that recognized a need for more social workers within the athletic industry, understanding the values that social work can bring from a strength-based and an empowerment perspective, to understanding the ways in which systems interact, and also a really strong call for grassroots advocacy and wanting to promote the best of what sports has to offer. So as a part of that initial group of 4, we realized that we did not have a professional organization that really represented the value in the face of what sports social workers can contribute to society. So we formed at that time the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. And since 2015, we've been able to grow exponentially from the 4 of us that founded it to now over 300 members across North America and really across the globe, from Australia, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Still waiting on that first South American member. So if you happen to be on this locker room chat for South America, give us a look. We'd love to be able to expand our efforts and our work in South America as well. But our organization really serves 3 primary focus. One is to be able to perform educational events just like this, to be able to have open conversations and open dialogues about what the vulnerabilities that exist within the world of sport are and how we can utilize our practice background and our expertise to be able to contribute back to an athlete, a coach, and an administrative population. We do a lot of advocacy work, looking specifically around issues of behavioral health, sexual assault, sport trafficking, and a variety of other topics that are certainly a passion to those with a social work background. And then the third component that is really big to us is the networking. And that is, how can we utilize our platform to not only network internally with our members, but to be able to use our platform to network with organizations just like the Sport for Social Change Network? And how can we collaborate together to make sure that our impact is not felt just locally, but it really has an international impact. So we are beyond excited to share in this effort with the Sport for Social Change Network, to meet some new faces from across the globe and to share what expertise we might be able to share on this particular topic. Go ahead, Stacy. So we do have 3 objectives that we're going to, hopefully by the end of this 45 minutes or so of presenting, and then through our 15 minutes or so of question and answer period, be able to achieve. Number 1 is to learn why listening is so important. I know it sounds like a pretty simple objective, but I think all of us would say that listening is a lot more complex and difficult than what it is that we might just conjure up by saying the word listening. Second is how to focus on nonverbal communication. So the third component is to learn more about the 4 techniques for managing emotional reactivity. So I love that word reactivity, because oftentimes I think we hear the word reactance, and reactance sometimes brings up negative connotations in our mind, where reactivity is a natural thing that all of us do, right? We all react to different situations with a variety of different emotions. So I'm excited for Dr. Kratz to be able to share a little bit more about that conversation as well. So today we're also talking about secrets of strengthening communication. So that starts with engaging in real dialogue, not just taking turns talking. So we are excited to be able to share some tips and trades that we've learned along our career paths that allow for us to better connect with the individuals that are around us. I think Dr. Kratz would agree with me that the ability to establish that trust-based relationship with the individuals in our lives is key to be able to see growth and to be able to see change and to use sport for the power that it really can be. We also want to make sure that we're spending time talking about the actual concept of hearing what people mean, not just what they say. And that's where this whole conversation of nonverbal and verbal cues comes into play, so that we're able to really see the meaning behind a conversation as opposed to just the words that are coming out of somebody's mouths. So, and ultimately, this entire concept starts with listening. So we believe this is such a strong way to start this entire locker room chat series, knowing that if we start with this concept of listening, which is at the foundation of the relationships that we're going to build and the foundation of having critical conversations with individuals, that we'll be able to move forward in our locker room chat series to the more complex conversations regarding a variety of different topics. And ultimately, through all of these locker room chats that we're going to have, the goal is to feel great together, right? To make sure that each one of us leaves each hour that we spend together feeling like we've learned something, feeling that we've grown in our connection with individuals that are around us, and that we can utilize these skills, even if they're just reminders about what these skills are, for the greater good for the individuals that we work with. So why is listening so important, right? The art of listening is key to good relationships and great teams. So I come from not only a social work background, but I really come from an athletic background as well. So I was a former collegiate athlete in the sport of tennis. I've spent the last 20 years at competitive coaching levels, whether that be at high levels within youth sport organizations, and for the last handful of years as a collegiate tennis coach. And I can tell you just from that personal perspective that our teams are only as good as we are at listening to each other. So when you've got so many unique personalities and so much diversity that is represented on any given team, to be able to create that inclusive environment, you've got to be able to find ways to listen to each other and to be able to understand the reactions that individuals are showing and how those reactions translate to feelings, into spoken words and nonverbal cues that individuals are going to present to us. As we go through the next, at this point, 30 minutes or so, we're going to really try to hone in on why listening is so important and what are these things that we need to pull from our engagements with other individuals to make the most of those experiences, so that we can learn more about each other, and then we can become more successful, not only as humans, but also more successful in our competitions and more successful as athletes and coaches and other personnel that are engaged in the lives of athletes. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Kratz, who's going to spend a little bit of time talking about empathy and a handful of other skills that are important to learn. So Dr. Kratz, all you.
All right. Wow. Thanks, Dr. Moore. That was fantastic. And I just feel that kicking it off like this today, and with you opening up this session, it just energizes me for sure, and all of us, and the wealth of knowledge that we have with everybody that's listening today, to build this idea where we're starting from a core value of empathy. Really, empathy is about that place that we have an ability to understand and share our feelings of another, to share and understand. And it's an enormous concept, this idea of empathy. And there are famous research, and including people like Goleman and Ekman, that have broken down empathy into 3 components. And those 3 components are a cognitive empathy, where how we think about other people, an emotional empathy, how we feel about other people, and a compassionate portion of empathy, of how we behave towards other people with a loving and kind heart. So cognitive, emotional, and compassionate portions of empathy give us that sense all together in one nutshell about what people are going through, and trying to expand our ability to imagine what someone else might be feeling or what they might be thinking. And we have to do that by knowing that it hurts people when they feel that they're not listened to. So from an empathic point of view, we would want to let them know that we're listening to them. If we are all on the same page, that empathy is the value of building this idea of sharing and listening. We also know that when we have an empathic stance, we can help others bear witness. We can actually share in their experience on these teams, on what happens to them, on the families they live in, the communities they live in, that we all live in, to bring this idea of the power of sport in every level of the individual and the community. And it also helps us to know that when we're heard, it means that we're being taken seriously, that I matter, that you matter, that our team matters, that our organization matters, because our community matters. So when we start thinking about, and when we start thinking about listening, something that we think, oh, that's a piece of cake, really, and real chunk it down, it's starting from a place of empathy. So we are intentionally paying attention to our stance about what another person is saying to us. So the thing about listening is that it connects us. When we say, I want to be a great listener, I want to feel the empathy and build my skills at an empathic stance, it's about building this team confidence as well, not only the individual, but it also creates that team mutuality, that we're all in this together, that we want the best from each other and for each other, and that we have everyone's heart at the forefront, because when we do that, everybody wins. Maybe not on the scoreboard, but on the personal level, and then on the community level. So when we listen, when we build confidence of the individual, of the team, and build this sense of mutuality, we actually are also building team enthusiasm. And when we have team enthusiasm, that creates the win on every single level. So there's reasons, and we know what they are, and we continue to work at it because we know it's not easy. This is actually one of my favorite quotes, and it says, people who don't talk to us are people who don't expect us to listen. So when we think about like our situations, whether it's personal or bringing them to the team, who's not speaking to us? And what is that message telling us? Is it maybe that our own listening skills need to be, we need to up our game on our own listening skills? So as we move forward, there are 6 big active listening skills that are standard all over the world. We just call them the big 6. It's kind of like how in South Africa, it's the big 5 for animals, but no, this is the big 6 for listening skills. The first one, of course, is paying attention, which means focusing on the moment in time, which we know can actually be quite difficult. So something that's seemingly easy is actually something we have to work on all the time. Paying attention means we're using something like a comfortable tone. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit more about tone later on in a few slides down the road. Paying attention also, when we are actively listening and we're paying attention, we're also slowing it down. Because one way that we can definitely show we're not listening is when we're clipping through and we're too fast. And that happens in the sport arena, of course, the metaphor of the whole sport arena. When we get excited, when we are, especially if our reactivity, like Matt just said, is on the way up. But if we pay attention and slow it down, it's going to help with getting more of the message of people opening up to you and listening. Another way we can pay attention is don't cut in. So we all, we all know about, like, don't cut me off. I want to finish my thought, but it's hard to do that sometimes, especially when we're so excited. We have so much to talk about, And we have so much wealth of a great wealth of knowledge to like spread. Sometimes we want to cut people off, because really what you're saying is my idea takes precedence over yours. And if we do that, then the person that you're working with is going to say, wait, they're not listening to me. And then it's going to have the fallout that we talked about. If we pay attention to our body language, which is culturally bound, knowing what other cultures expect from us or we expect from them about how we use our body, then we are also showing that we are listening. So we're paying attention to how we're using our body to get our message across. So like I'm just thinking right now how I'm using my hands, right? I'm getting the message across. I want to be open. So I'm paying attention. I'm also staying in the present. Right now, focusing, I'm saying, okay, what's in this moment and why am I here? And what can I do to open up not only my stance, but my heart to this person that's on the other side of me. And that takes a stance of humility. Humility is recognizing that we're not always right. And humility is recognizing that I have things to learn, always. And when we are paying attention to the people that are speaking with us, if we bring a sense of humility to that relationship, the relationship grows. And from that growth, we have stronger individuals that are more confident, we have stronger teams, and we go for the win for the community as well. Okay, so that's our first skill, which is huge, right? We just have to pay attention. Okay, we also will benefit by withholding judgment. So having an open mind, knowing that there are so many things that I don't know, kind of the expression, the more I know, the less I know. So coming to a relationship like that, also being able to suspend judgment, which means that we're getting rid of all those stereotypes that we're coming into a relationship with or a conversation with. We're holding back on criticisms, especially something like yes, but you statements. Yes, but you do this, or yes, but this happened. So we're holding back on any of those kind of criticisms. And we're also to help make the best of this conversation, we're also avoiding a combative stance. So we're talking about building relationships. We're talking about having people open up to us to strengthen what we're doing. And one way we can do that within withholding judgment is avoiding a combative stance. So really, and at the end a little bit, we're going to talk about how we can do that. So that's withholding judgment. We also can use a tool of reflecting and thinking in your speech that you're not assuming you understand everything. So you're actually doing the opposite. You're assuming there's things that you don't understand. And that links right back to humility. We also, a tool that is so useful is when we mirror information with the people that we're speaking with. So examples of that. When one of your athletes or maybe a parent or a coach, a co-coach says something to you, like, for instance, I'm really having a hard time keeping my temper in order. A reflecting of that would be like, oh, I hear you saying that you're having a hard time. It's actually mirroring exactly what they say. Why that is important? Because you're showing that you are listening, that you are hearing the words they're saying. And that takes a lot of paying attention, doesn't it? Because you're on, you're like, what are they telling me? I want to know, because with my empathic heart, I want to make this relationship stronger for everybody. And I want to be in that place where I'm a helper. So the other thing about reflecting, the tool, that it comes with practice. And that is feel in the flow of the conversation where you actually periodically paraphrase the main points. So for instance, I'm coming to you and I'm saying, I'm having a really difficult time. I don't feel like these children are, these youth, these athletes are putting it in their best, and I feel like I'm not getting from them what they need, and there's chatter and they're not paying attention, and I'm just so frustrated, and I just don't know what to do. Now, on the other side, I'm the listener. I periodically paraphrase. Okay, I can hear that. I see you're really getting frustrated. You don't think like the kids are paying attention. You feel like that you're less effective, that you're not being able to pull out from them what you would like to see them achieve. That simple paraphrasing is indication to that person that you're in front of that says, oh, they really get me. I'm being understood. Oh, pardon me. Even with my phone off. Okay, so the big six, reflecting. Okay, let's keep moving. What about clarifying? A lot of times when we're speaking with people, we're like, okay, and we have a million questions in our head. It's okay to ask questions about any part of the the conversation, the communication, verbal and nonverbal, that's ambiguous, that you just don't get. Open-ended questions work really well in this situation. Can you explain a little bit more for me? Can you tell me what that's like? How about some examples of when those kids are when you feel like you're not connecting with the athletes? Tell me what that's like. So open-ended questions work really well at getting more clarification. In a future workshop, we're going to talk more about building that skill of open-ended questions, because it is a skill. We naturally go to this place where we want a yes, no answer, or some quick answer, some quick explanation. What time did you get there? 6 o'clock. Okay. Can you explain to me why that you're a little bit later than we had expected? See how those would get two different answers? So when you use an open-ended question, you actually are showing that you want to know more. And that leads to empathy, right back as the core. We also can use summarizing. So in our conversation, we mirrored back. We also periodically paraphrased. And at the end, we can summarize and say, okay, so what I heard today was, thank you so much for opening up and sharing. And I'm so glad we got to talk today. What I got out of it was this. Always following up with, did I get it? Is there anything I missed? So not only are you saying, you're showing with your active listening skill that you can summarize exactly what happened in this conversation, you're actually showing that you have an open stance to recognize you may not have gotten something right. And that is a sense of humility, that we don't have all the answers at times. So when we summarize, we restate what happened, we open up for any clarification, we are saying to our listener, we're saying, I respect you, and I want the best for you, and I'm ready to be in this space with you, present today. It's so effective. And that's why it's called the Big Six, because they work. The last thing is about sharing, which is a rub, because oftentimes there's a power differential, right, in these conversations. that we're having in our athletic spaces. So how much do we share and how much do we not share? Though that's a magic question. So the word is always when appropriate. And that is vague, right? When appropriate. You will build your own confidence in your listening skills to know when you are ready to share something about yourself, when you can share your own feelings, when you can share suggestions, especially based on your expertise and your knowledge and all that you have to make these teams, these organizations stronger. A way to get used to that type of like, how much do I share? How much do I want to? How much am I willing to? Is to consider sharing a similar experience or an idea you had. So it keeps us in the lane. It keeps us focused. If you have a team member that's experiencing something at home that is difficult for them to navigate, you can use your empathic skill to say, you know, I had a similar experience at one time about overcoming communication mishaps at home or at work or with other team members. You're not alone. It happens, and it happens to me too, because I'm human as well. My idea is that this, and you can fill in the blank. My idea is that perhaps what I went through or the story I share with you about other people that I know is this was helpful, or this didn't help so much. So what you're showing is like, okay, thank you for sharing. I appreciate that we're in this space together. I have shown you that I know what the message you're trying to get to me. And you know what? You're not alone. And this is also about me and about other stories, and basically sometimes about the experience of being human. And what that will do is build confidence in the people that you're with, in the relationships, not only about that there's a normalization, but also even in the most tragic of times, there's a normalization, but also that they can open up to you because they feel that you care. And you're showing the behavior of caring and wanting the best for others in an empathic way is to show that you're listening. It's all a big circle, which is a wonderful circle, and we should all be on it. There's 3 telling behaviors that really get to this idea of the big 6. And the first one is not talking when others are speaking, which in the Zoom environment is so tough, isn't it? It is, there's delays all the time. You don't get the body language that helps us in settings when somebody tells us they're done. And so now it's our turn. We miss that often. But if we can work on letting them finish and even being comfortable that there might be a pause between what they say and then when you start speaking in your comeback of sorts, then if we're comfortable with that space, we're ensuring that our behavior is showing we're listening. The other thing is letting others know you're listening through your facial expressions and verbal sounds, or even the use of your body. So if you're listening to somebody, you're gonna be looking at them most probably. Of course, there's culturally bound issues here, right? But most probably you're going to be listening and looking at them. You might be nodding your head. You might be actually leaning in like, okay, now let me tell me more about this. You might be actually saying things like, oh, wow. Or, I didn't know. You might add some words to that. Might be just the real, I get it. These are telling behaviors that shows your participant that you are there. the last one is really about that repeat. So I hear you. I hear you so well that I can actually repeat what you've said. I'm getting all the words here. So I want to hand it back to Matt because he's going to talk to us about nonverbal communication.
So Dr. Kratz, thanks so much. So when I look at the list of active listening skills that you just went over, I kind of find myself thinking about two different things. One is just that self-reflection of when you see lists like that, where are your strengths at and where are your opportunities for growth at? So while I've been at social work practice for quite a while, there are still plenty of opportunities for growth when it comes to utilizing the big six and what I excel at versus what are things I need to continue to educate myself on and to become better at. So I would encourage everybody to embrace that idea of self-reflection when you see list of types of behaviors and to figure out what can I work on to continue to make my active listening as strong as it can be for the individuals that are important to me. Second thing that always comes to my mind with the concept of active listening is just the importance of the role that each of you all play in the lives of the individuals that you work with. So I tell individuals on a routine basis that throughout the duration of our college tennis season, I spend more time with my athletes than I do with my own 3 kids. So and it's a painful thing to say, but it's a reality of it. I mean, I spend hours and hours with this group of athletes that I have, and whether I want to accept that role or I don't want to accept the role, I mean, in their life, they spend more time with me than they do their own parents throughout the duration of the season, or potentially than they do with their own significant others. So that whole concept of active listening takes on a brand new meaning when you realize the true importance and value that you add and that you bring to the lives of the individuals that are around you. And it amps up the pressure a little bit because you really got to feel that element of connection and the ability to utilize listening to understand what's going on in the lives of these individuals that are really important to you. And I think nonverbal communication is another factor that obviously goes into this listening components. And obviously 80% roughly from what research tells us of what we communicate comes through our nonverbal cues. So if you watched while Stacy was presenting, you probably saw a lot of those nonverbal cues for me with facial expressions and things like that that were measurable based off of what you could see on the screen. And when we think about nonverbal communication, there's a list of them that we're going to go into a little bit of greater detail as we get to the next couple of slides, but they include facial expressions, the pitch, the tone, the volume of our voice, perspiration, respiration rates, gestures, postures, and other subtle body language and signals that might be unique to us as humans and individuals and how we respond in different situations. So the first one that we're going to talk about on the next slide is this concept of nonverbal from a facial expression. So research does tell us that when we think about facial expressions, that there is some universality to how individuals from across the globe can respond to different situations and environments, right? We all can typically tell when we recognize that somebody is happy. We can recognize generally when people are sad or when they are fearful or when they're angry or possibly even when they're experiencing moments of disgust. So while we might be able to recognize those facial expressions, does not mean that every individual arrives to those facial expressions through the same experiences. And this is where cultural competence and an understanding of inclusivity becomes so important, so that we can understand what are the actual cultural and the social norms that are leading to these facial expressions that we're seeing. What makes me angry might be completely different than what makes Dr. Kratz angry, or what makes me happy might be completely different than what makes Zane happy. And we've got to be able to understand the unique components of the individuals that we're working with so that we do not misread a facial expression and that we're better able to connect with what those expressions are. So I'll go back to, the 22 athletes that I have on my team come from all sorts of walks of life. Several individuals from international countries, individuals from single parent household, 2-parent households, individuals that identify with the LGBT plus community, individuals that are coming from a bunch of different socioeconomic backgrounds, completely different secondary education backgrounds, whether it be public school environments or private school environments. And each one of those 22 individuals, while we share a lot of commonalities, we all vastly differ from each other. So to be able to really understand what these expressions that I'm seeing throughout the course of a practice, throughout a competition, or throughout a meeting that I'm having with these athletes isn't always going to be the same, right? So it's important to be able to really dig deep into where it is that they're coming from, what their experiences have been, and to try to understand how those experiences shape and form the expressions that we're seeing. And the more time that we spend actively listening to individuals, going back to what Stacy talked about earlier, the better we're able to understand what these facial expressions really mean. And we're able to better connect with the cultures and the social norms that these individuals are bringing forward to us. So as you all continue to do the great things within your communities, I think it's another opportunity for self-reflection, is to be able to figure out, what do these facial expressions that I'm seeing from the individuals that I'm working with, what do they really mean? So do they mean that they're happy? Do they mean that they're sad? But how do they arrive at those particular emotions, and what can we take away from that to inform our understanding of those individuals and to better serve in our role as coaches or administrators or as mentors, whatever capacity we're working in with those particular athletes. Go ahead, Stacy. Perfect. Thanks. So the next slide that we're going to talk about goes over some of the nonverbals regarding pitch, tone, and volume. So pitch refers to the highness or the lowness of the tone of the voice that we're actually using. I think all of you all, with a pitch of a voice, can typically tell when somebody's excited or when they're not excited, things like that. With tone, we're looking at pitch quality, and we're also looking at the strength that goes along with that as well. And then volume is something that we utilize to help us communicate the intensity of what it is that we're trying to convey. And obviously, for those of you that have been working with athletes, I'm sure you've got a range of volumes that your voice can go into. So I definitely have a parental voice. I have a true coach voice. I have a hyped up and pet voice that I can bust out at any moment. But volume is another way in which individuals understand what it is that's being conveyed, and us as individuals should be able to try to pick up what those pitches, those tones, and those volumes help us to be able to look at. From a culturally bound perspective, the louder we are typically signifies the more intense we are. The softer we are typically signifies sort of that less intense approach, and then variance abounds, right? So, I mean, obviously each one of us might think that something is more intense than somebody else might think. So again, you look at the individuals that you're working with. I've got some athletes on my team that you have to be pretty intense with for them to actually pick up that you're being intense. Others, you raise your voice even just a little bit, and it is enough to just freak them out and to make them think that, oh my gosh, I've done something horrible. So you kind of got to, again, take into account those individual and those unique perspectives to figure out, how do I approach my communications with individuals? And when I hear individuals talking back to me, what are they trying to signify to me through this use of pitch, tone, and volume that is out there? So I am going to, for the sake of time, pass it back over to Stacy. She's going to talk a little bit more about emotional reactivity and some other things, and then we will get to the end of our presentation at that point, and we will open it up to questions and answers. So Dr. Kratz, back to you.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. So what we're really talking about is strengthening our communication to build stronger teams, stronger relationships, and we're basing it in this core concept of empathy and why we value empathy to bring out the best in each other, right? And how listening connects us. So we had those 6 big skills of paying attention, of withholding judgment, of reflecting, clarifying, summarizing, and sharing. Big 6. And we talked about nonverbals now. There's 2 more points we want to dive into today, and that's about building better communication, stronger teams through watching about our emotional reactivity. Because we can do that, especially when a game's on the line here. When we feel stressed, angry, hurt, we tend to react impulsively. Naturally, it's part of what it means to be human. So we're in this state, we can't get into this state where it's fight or flight, and we tend to react emotionally. And that is really overreacting. And that's where communication stops. Overreaction is about emotional reactivity. So it's in the moment, it's about our perceptions and how situations are altered. It's so important to recognize, because then we can intuitively see how it stops good communication and therefore stops the way that we're building our team. Signs that we're being emotionally reactive: you're affronted at the slightest little thing. Your reaction is out of proportion to the situation, and you can even feel it, or like people like it's just either way too little or way too much. You can, maybe there's people or yourself storm off in a cloud, maybe, and you're just ready to run. Maybe you're thinking all these circumstances have caused your reaction, leaving you feeling like you're actually a victim. Like all these things are causing me to go overreact. That's really about just emotional reactivity. Maybe another sign that you're being emotionally reactive is that you find people really prickly, and that you find overall that it's hard to be around people. There's tools to get through that too, and it might need some clinical intervention, but if it gets too much, but we can actually pay attention to our own sense of reaction. So there's 4 techniques that I just want to go over real quickly that this easy. We'll call them the big 4. And it is about managing that reactivity. The first is to respond rather than react. And when we respond, we know that it can really be about reframing how we're coming into a conversation. So it is really about the experience of coming together and stepping back and saying, I'm not going to react. I'm going to listen and respond. Listen and respond. The best thing here is to tell yourself that you're not the victim of circumstances, that you can choose how to respond. Now, there's a fine line there, because, as social workers, we understand that there are systems at work as well. But when we talk about individual relationship building to strengthen the people that we care about, we want to pay attention to responding. Another a quick technique is literally take a breath. Just take a breath. Buy yourself that millisecond of time before you react. And then you can even feel it, where the expected explosion might even lessen a little bit. The rage lessens. Managing that emotional reactivity, breathing, knowing that if you replenish your energy along the way, so this idea of self-care, which can and has gone too far. It has gone too far in the general cultural conversation about self-care, I believe. But we do know we do have to replenish our energy. We understand that there are systems that are working against our best behavior, our best intentions, that are systems that are working to keep some of us not in the best place that we can possibly be. And so there is a responsibility of those systems to help us replenish our energy, but we also do have to replenish it ourselves too. So if we're feeling drained and we're feeling depleted, you're going to have less energy to be an active listener, because it takes a lot of commitment. And your empathic soul, that's why you're in these spaces, to build great teams, to be a great team member. When you replenish your own energy in the way that you think is best, you know that you'll be able to keep that emotional reactivity tempered a little bit. And knowing that, get to know your triggers. And that takes time, right? I know that one of my triggers is when people leave early, to tell you the truth. So one of my, like, don't leave, we're still talking. I have more to say. So I know that's a trigger, and I don't want to get all enraged. So I have to pay attention to that. I have to say, okay, this is just a trigger. I know it, I can get it. So it takes time to really focus on what it is for us. It takes time to identify what are those things that are often just so predictable, making us react to something instead of responding. When we can start paying attention to ourselves in that way, we become amazing listeners. And amazing listeners are great people. And I know every one of you has that in your soul. Matt, what about these?
Well, before we get to those, just a couple of quick little side notes on the previous slide that you talked about. So one thing that I love about the 4 elements that Dr. Kratz just went over with emotional reactivity is I think they're extremely transferable to other individuals that we're working with. So when we're working with those youth athletes, or we're working with fellow coaches or fellow individuals in sport-based organizations, it's important for us to demonstrate what that should look like, but also to have conversations with those individuals about how they can also manage their own reactions. We've got a quote that hangs up in our tennis room on our campus that simply says that a breath is a difference between a negative reaction and a positive action. So I think it's so true in the world of sport, that especially in a sport like tennis, where points are coming one after another, right? So, and the game can go quick, and a game can turn into a set, and a set can turn into a match in a blink of an eye. So, and if you don't have the ability to recenter yourself in that moment, and to be able to take that breath and to find a way to learn from what just happened and to make improvements on it and to change, you really are not demonstrating what we expect for individuals to demonstrate. And oftentimes you're setting yourself up for even greater disappointment, which is just going to lead to an even larger reaction in the end. So just something to take into note. But go ahead, Stacy, back to the next slide. So when we were putting together this presentation, I laughed so hard when I sat and I read through these 8 lists of items that we should all try to avoid, right? Characteristics of bad communication. I just laughed because I've got 2 teenagers at home. So, and I just thought to myself, and I told Stacy this as well, I was like, I see these every single day. If I make it through a day without 2 teenagers insisting that they're right, or blaming each other for something, or playing the hopeless card that I just can't do something, or being passive aggressive, it's a great day in my life. So unfortunately, these are ones that I think all of us become all too familiar with, and the ability to be able to recognize, and I don't want to say to confront, but I think to bring to light to other individuals that, you know, this is what's being displayed through these types of communication skills. And this maybe is a better approach to be able to take to get your message to come across, I think is really important. So insisting that I'm right? The whole argument of I'm right and you're wrong, and not being open-minded to the ideas and the thoughts of other individuals, being closed off, which is the complete opposite of what Stacy talked about earlier when saying that really with active listening, it starts with this whole idea of being open-minded and embracing and opening our arms to be able to listen and to hear what other individuals have to say. The blame game, the problem is the other person's fault, right? So while I might take a tad bit of responsibility for something, ultimately the largest portion of the responsibility falls on this person because they were just ultimately more wrong than I was in that particular situation. Again, not showing the level of growth and development and accountability that ultimately is needed for us to be able to actively listen and to grow from each other. The whole idea of hopelessness, so giving up and insisting that there really is no point in trying, and each of us, I'm sure, has faced an individual, and in many situations, I'm sure athletes that have come to us with these feelings of hopelessness. I just simply can't execute this shot, or I can't get this ball to go in the direction that I want it to, or I can't play this position because of X, Y, and Z. So trying to find ways to maintain elements of strength within our communication. And I think oftentimes hopelessness does get conveyed more so through the nonverbal like communications and cues that we see, and being able to recognize what does feelings of hopelessness look like on the individuals that we're working with. Passive aggressiveness is the one thing that I can't deal with. So while Stacy can't have individuals leave early, passive aggressiveness just drives me absolutely insane. I've got to constantly check myself to make sure that I don't just completely lose it when I see it. So the pouting, the withdrawal, the saying nothing, the storming door or storming out, the slamming doors, the eye rolls from the 14-year-old daughter, those are the types of things that are just a killer for me. Sarcasm, it's, hidden tension. Sometimes individuals do use sarcasm as a defense mechanism. So I think it's important to be able to recognize when somebody is, utilizing sarcasm in an inappropriate way versus utilizing sarcasm as a potential plea or request for help and support, and for us to dig a little bit deeper into that. The defensiveness, so you refuse to admit imperfection, wrongdoing. The counterattack is responding to criticism with criticism. So, you're having that conversation with somebody and you're going over, what I wouldn't even necessarily say are criticism as much as maybe opportunities for growth that you're presenting to that individual. And they respond back with things that you're not doing right. Just not productive to have those types of communications. And then diversion. So list past problems instead of the here and now. So it's always easy to go back into our own unique personal histories to find things that could shape why we do things the way in which they are now, and to sort of output blame to past experience versus focusing right now on the future. And there's a quote, and I always butcher the quote, but we ultimately can't change the past. We can't predict the future. We really can only focus in the minute that we're in right now. And I think that whole idea of diversion is counterintuitive to the fact that we're here in the present. Let's try to do what we can now to learn and to grow and to become stronger and more global human beings as a result of that. So go ahead, Stacy. Mm-hmm. All right, so feeling great together. What have we accomplished or hopefully been able to accomplish throughout our time together so far? So obviously listening is far more important than we realize. It forms the basis of all of the human interactions that we're going to have with one another. When we empathize, we have the ability to grow. It allows for us, like Dr. Kratz said, to really embrace what individuals have experienced, to be able to engage in those unique experiences and to try to learn from the experiences of those around us. And the gift of our attention really does build the strongest team. When individuals believe that they're cared for, that they're listened to, that their thoughts and their opinions matter to the individuals around them, it creates a safe environment, a supportive environment, and an environment that allows for individuals to excel throughout competitive environments and to really put their best foot forward, in my perspective, not just in athletics, but put their best foot forward in their educational pursuits and the pursuits that they have outside of school and outside of sport, and just what it is that they can contribute and can give to the world around them. And then our final slide here just looks at all of our social media platforms. So make sure that if you're interested in learning more about the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, that you can join us on Instagram, through LinkedIn, through our Twitter account. We would be happy to have you follow. Certainly we can follow you all back as well so that we can create that international collaboration and dialogue that is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve through our Locker Room chat series here. And then our next session that we have together will be on Friday, August the 27th. Our next session is on building great teams through great communication. So Dr. Kratz, anything you would like to add before we move to the question and answer period?
I just want to add thank you. And at the end of this slide are some references that are awesome to learn more. And some of these are available right on Amazon. I think Amazon is in South Africa now, correct me if I'm wrong, but especially the book, The Lost Art of Listening, which I'm holding up here in the photo in the camera. And this is where much of our information came. This is just hot off the press about 2 months ago. Appreciate everything. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides so we can see each other. And Zane, Norman, questions?
Hey, thanks, Stacy. Thanks, Matt. So I know we have one question from someone in the audience, and I think, and if I am correct, and obviously with you guys being American, with us being in South Africa, and also with a lot of our attendees here today, there's a lot of cultural differences, especially with us working in the field of sport for development and sport within Africa, just let alone like South Africa, we have 11 different cultures or languages that we need to learn. If we look across the border, like to basically in Tanzania, there's like 40 different cultural differences. And basically the question is, can you expand on the cultural differences in communication styles and how best to address or respond to them?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, Alex, for that question. Alex Diaz is actually a member of our ASWIS and global and international worker and expert in clinical interventions. And I think really at the core of this is having that empathic stance that I don't know everything, and really learning what you do need to know. So for instance, I do a lot of work in the refugee sport arena. And so refugees from all over the world, one of the first things that I do is go literally search what the refugee situation is in that country of my client, and then learn about that country at a very in the beginning in a peripheral way. But to even go into a situation where I want to learn and I want to listen and I want to build a relationship, knowing that I have to do my homework right from the very beginning. So for instance, I've got to spend some time in Japan at the very beginning of COVID. And one of the things I didn't realize before I got there was proximity to a person, like how close I could go to somebody or how far I should stand away. As it turned out, I was a little bit too close. So and I didn't really know that until somebody told me. But that's part of that body language and facial expressions when you're really close that are part of the communication. So I'm being open to learn. I think that's the first place. What do you think, Matt?
I mean, the only thing that I was going to add, and I think it's just a great question from Alex, who I love dearly, but I think it also lends itself to how these topics are going to advance. I think open-ended questions are so important when you're trying to understand the cultural components that factor into the relationships that you're going to have with individuals. And, you know, expressing that vulnerability. I know it's hard for a lot of us to express vulnerability, but if I don't know a ton about your culture, I mean, I've got to be vulnerable. I've got to be vulnerable in conveying that I don't. I've got to be vulnerable in asking for some guidance and assistance on what works best with you in given situations so that I can tailor my approach to what it is that you need and what it is that I can offer. And certainly also at the same time, trying to share a little bit about my cultural perspective and how it is that I view things and how I experience things. I think that's where opportunities for growth really allow for themselves to happen.
Yeah, it's actually if we go into a situation where we're having conversations like this, it's an exciting area for growth to learn about each other and to have that kind of an esprit in our lives that I certainly don't know, and I will never be the expert of you, but boy, I really want to learn and I'm ready to hear. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that, guys. I've got a question here from Matletini, if I'm saying your name correctly. And he basically he wants to understand the dynamics of this program in terms of capacitating individuals, especially in local teams. And then I have a question on myself and from myself. And basically, we live in interesting times. Basically, the new normal called COVID. Now, how do we transfer these communication and these non-communication skills to platforms online, as some of us around the world are experiencing third waves? And I know some of the individuals that are on the webinar today are obviously practitioners themselves in the sport and sport for development field. So how do you also now communicate and that non-communication skill during COVID or during social media? Because, you know, it's very easy to see someone's body language, like Matt was saying with those but now how do you view that in these interesting times that we have or that we are in?
Well, let's, Matlatini, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Thanks so much for asking that question. I'm wondering if it's about ASWIS, which is the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, or if he's talking about the Sport for Social Change Network. But the dynamics of our program of ASWIS is that we're a member organization and that we are supporting our members in all the ways that they need. So they tell us what they need, but mostly, like Matt was talking in the very beginning, it's at a core of networking and building knowledge between us. And then we'll be able to expand it out to other disciplines and welcome a transdisciplinary approach to learn from psychologists, to learn and exchange with psychology, with psychiatry, with coaching initiatives, with other community-based organizations. So we focus on our members, strengthening them to then become much more transdisciplinary. I hope that's helpful. And maybe Zane, he was also talking about the Sports Social Change Network.
For those of you who would obviously like this video and things, you obviously just follow our social media pages, basically Instagram, Sports for Social Change Network. Also, this video is live on Facebook with Sports for Social Change Southern Africa. So if you guys also want to catch a recap there. And Maslatini, if you are very much interested also in our network, and we basically also help NGOs is in the sport for development sector through 3 key pillars. If you'd like more information, please do visit our website, which is www.scn.co.za.
Right.
So Stacy, in terms of how do we respond to those cues when we during COVID and all of that?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I believe is so important, especially in our written communication in social media and replies, is paying attention to tone and using visuals to help people explain, to get the explanation of your tone. So I know we're kind of emojied out, but they work. Because even if in a response on social media that may sound a little curt, if we put a smiley face next to it, like people can see, they know, right, that you are happy. That facial expression becomes right there. I have seen in clinical practice the use of texting and how it destroys communication without paying attention to tone. And it goes so fast. So I think tone is the cue. What do you think, Matt?
No, I would agree with you. I was just laughing, thinking about all the times that I've seen those quick messages, but the smile at the end just makes it all better, right?
Thumbs up. We're good. It goes to that thing about where 80% of our communication is not about our words. That's what, if we go with that research, we better put a lot of effort into showing what our words mean through pictures. Yeah. Is that helpful, Zane?
I think so, because I know from my end, and I'm sure some of and also, I don't know, maybe the old people's side, but like those emojis just drive me crazy when you see someone dance and you're just like, yeah, or when people use the wrong emoji with the wrong text as well. So I think we should also just be careful with that. And then we just got one last question, and then I think that we're done for today. And I'd obviously like to still extend my gratitude to both you and Matt for obviously making yourselves available today. And that question is from Marshall Norte, if I'm saying your surname correctly. And he said, could you please go through the diversion as an X-tick of bad communication, giving examples to clarify? And here, this is directly at Matt.
Love it. I love when I get tagged at the @Matt. So that should be my official Twitter handle, I think. I'm sure it's probably taken, but if not, I should try to claim it while I can. So from the diversion standpoint, I mean, the things that we look at with diversion is oftentimes changing subjects. So, I mean, there are plenty of times in which I'm having conversations with my athletes about things that are going on either in their competitive play or things that we're noting in the classroom or things that we're seeing with external behaviors. And during those conversations, an easy thing to do is to try to change the subject to something else. So to, in essence, try to avoid the conversation at all costs. Oftentimes individuals will bring up the past. So, you know, in the past, I've experienced X, Y, and Z, which is causing me to behave in this, you know, manner in which you're seeing before us. And that's not to diminish the fact that the past experiences don't shape who we are, because they certainly do. But there's also, I think, a time and a place to have conversations about past experiences, and also to be able to focus on the present and what's right there in front of you. And I also think the other thing that oftentimes you see with diversion is the fact that they want to blame you for their actions instead of taking personal accountability for it. So, you know, in a tennis coach's world, well, the strategy that you gave me just isn't working, or I can't execute this strategy because I've not learned how to do X, Y, and Z the way in which it needs to be done.
I love it. And if we recognize that it's diversion, really as a tool to get out of this conversation, actually an empathic heart just would say something like, I know this is difficult. I know, but let's stay right here and talk about what we're talking about right at this moment. So you can actually bring that back in and show that, like, I'm listening and we're not talking about what we need to be talking about. So let's bring it back. I hope that's helpful, Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah, just to follow up from him. Sorry, just
go ahead.
From the presentation that the coach mentor facilitators working on themselves to enhance better communication, but how is this being passed on to the mentee athlete student, consciously or unconsciously?
I mean, for me, it boils down to the willingness to have critical conversations and to have those critical conversations in the moment. So, I mean, when you recognize that you're seeing these forms of communication that are not productive to personal growth and development as an individual, especially in that leadership or that coach or that mentor role, it's our responsibility to be able to bring it out and to let it be known. And that doesn't mean confrontation, but it means to have a heartfelt conversation. If I'm sitting with an athlete that is trying to bring up things that are not counterproductive to the conversation, I'll ask, what is this adding to the conversation, and how do these behaviors actually impact the ultimate goals that you're wanting to be able to achieve as an athlete? So it does not mean that I'm always in the right and they're always in the wrong. I mean, because usually it's a blend of the two, but I think a lot of it just boils down to, are you willing to, in that moment, to embrace the discomfort that could come with a critical conversation and to serve as an opportunity for growth for that individual and for you to facilitate that type of dialogue. So while we were talking about empathy, I made it an hour and 19 minutes into this presentation without a kid walking in, but I'm sure at the very end you could see the little arm was reaching over because he was ready for his daddy to come in to help him with something. So we almost made it, Stacy, without Maverick coming in and visiting.
That's never a goal. We love seeing him. So, and he's got the best name ever. So, what are you going to do with that? I hope that's helpful, Marshall. These are like big conversations, especially with this complex idea of empathic stance. And it's a core value of the social work profession. Social workers bring that to the sport arena, and we help people to open up their hearts and their minds to learning more, because communication is about coming together, and that's what we want to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, guys. Everyone, thank you, Stacy and Matt, for a great session. Thank you for everyone that has tuned in. Just before we go, just a quick, just a few announcements. So, for those, if you did really enjoy this webinar session, we'll be having our next one on the 30th of July. We'll be looking at disability inclusion with special guests Suzanne Masila from Special Olympics Kenya, and Jasmine Morris from Disability Leading of North Riding CFA, all the way from England. And then the next one we'll then have again with Matt and Stacy, and that we'll be looking at the art of listening and what are my participants, or what are they telling me. And I think in terms of, especially these times, especially with COVID, a lot of kids, these are all new Gen Zs and millennials, they give up very quickly. And how do we actually see those cues, or those important cues? What are they actually trying to tell me? So, yes, thank you again to everyone. Thanks for tuning to the live locker room chat. Thank you so much, Stacy. Thanks so much, Matt. Thanks so much, Norman, from behind the scenes. Everyone have a lovely weekend. Stay safe, and God bless you. Amen.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here. See you soon. Take care.